They don't need a nuclear weapon to ensure against regime change. Their regime is stronger than ever before. I mean, actually, since Israel strikes, the government has never had more support than it ever has.
How the do you know that? What, the Iranian regime is like one of the most unpopular regimes in the entire world.
They were protesting in Tehran the day after those decapitation strikes, demanding a military response.
How many people were at those protests? Do you think those protests, that the IRGC were protesting?
Head count for it to be valid or something like that?
Lonerbox, finish your question, please.
Do you think that the IRGC is like commands majority support in Iran? You'd be the first.
What do you have? Some stupid poll that proves it doesn't? I don't understand all the ins and outs of the Iranian people.
I could tell you know nothing
trends.
About the Iranian regime. Like, it's just like it's the least contested fact in geopolitics.
You're just making broad inferences on other data.
No, I'm being very charitable. I'm being charitable to a campus dip who will not accept any polling agency that isn't one that you already support. So
you're expecting me to be charitable.
I'm arguing on your terms.
Ridiculous PV bullshit as usual.
I'm arguing PV has nothing to do with how popular the Iranian regime is and how you measure popularity of a regime in a totalitarian state. Really? Hey, what's your data for the fact? Do you think I'm paid by PV right now?
I think there's a lot of data showing that you do receive money from PV.
Since when? When?
Since I think the last time that was published was what, like a year ago?
So you think I'm still paid by PV now?
I would assume so.
You assume so? Oh, so you haven't. It turns out that you have no data. No data to back up this thing.
Welcome to yet another episode of Whick TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. We are going to be talking about U.S. intervention. U.S. as the world police. Recently, Donald Trump decided to bomb Iran, to strike at Iran's nuclear facilities in order to intervene and stop them from gaining a possible nuclear weapon. Was that the right call? Is this something that the U.S. should be involved in? World policing the world stage. Should we go even further? Should we go for regime change in Iran? What about other areas in the world? Should we be protecting Taiwan? Should we be involved in Ukraine? Should we be involved in Israel at all? Should we divest from these things? We're going to talk about it all. We got some great guests, and I'm going to give the mic to them to kind of give their stance, give their thoughts, and we'll get into it. First and foremost, we're going to give the mic to Mr. Soypill himself. Give us your thoughts. Give us your take. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm the Soypill. My take on this is super simple. I'm not pro-intervention in every single possible case. Obviously, the Americans have done awful things, regime change in places where there shouldn't have been, Iraq war. However, I'm very much pushing back against the anti-intervention populist brain rot that has existed in this space as of the last 5 to 10 years, both on the right and the left. There's plenty of places where America has the wherewithal and the power and the responsibility, I might even say, to intervene, whether that be with U.S. aid, whether that be to help stop genocides like in Kosovo. And I think that there are just a lot of good ways that we can use the biggest military in the world to actually do good things rather than just horrible, awful things. So anyone who says America first, intervention bad, I very much vehemently push back against. There are plenty of places where we can intervene that are good things, and I think that we should support them.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go. Next up, we got Tim Imholt. Tim, how you doing? What's up?
I'm doing well. So I love the buzzwords brain rot and other stuff that get thrown around that are just getting kind of old and stretched out. But when it comes to intervention, we've done it too often. We've done it too easily. We've just flipped a switch and said, hey, let's go off and start, invading other countries and, doing regime change. We are not designed to be the world policeman. We should not be the one who gets to unilaterally decide what happens where. There's supposed to be international coalitions on these things. And I think the days of us being able to say, I don't like what's going on in that country, let's just send the military and get it over with. That needs to come to an end. And people need to really wrap their freaking heads around the fact that the military is designed to do one thing and one thing only, and that's to kill people and destroy stuff. They don't have any other mission.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. We're going to get into it, I am sure. But first, we have to pass the mic to Mr. Lonerbox. Go ahead.
Hey, I don't really think that it makes sense to talk about whether or not America should intervene / shouldn't, because obviously there are some cases where it makes a lot of sense, like Kosovo, and there are some places where it makes no sense at all, like Iraq, and this happened very close to one another. Yeah, America is responsible for a lot of disasters in the world. They're also responsible for a lot of good things in the world. They saved the day in World War II. They saved the day in Kosovo. They're obviously quite helpful to Israel in the Middle East. I think we're just in a situation now where like international trade and international politics and international relations is a thing. Like countries are not isolated unless you're Bhutan. America is one of the most successful economy in the international market, and that is not completely disconnected from their military endeavors either, from their ability to offer security to their trade partners, to make guarantees to certain nations for their security that would otherwise be taken up by America's rivals, say like China. So I think it's just something that has to be done. It needs to be done carefully, obviously, because military intervention is a really big thing. But I think the alternative to America intervening in the rest of the world in the ways that it does, militarily or otherwise, is probably not one that I would like to see anytime soon.
Okay, well, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show, and we will get into it as we go. Next up, we have first-time guest on my show. We'll see how he does. Beto, tell people who you are, why we should listen to you. What are your thoughts on intervention? Go ahead.
This is my first formal debate ever, actually. So bear with me if I'm not going as fast as I could be. I don't have as much knowledge as I think everybody else has in here, but what I have is a question that I think we need to consider before we can consider whether individual isolation or intervention is considered good or bad. And what I'm asking is this, is if we are to take an action, we need to consider whether it's necessary or not. And when we have a purpose associated with government, it has things that it must do and things it must not do. We need to consider if intervening with other sovereign nations militarily is something that is part of the purpose of government. And that's it.
Part of the purpose of the government. Okay, well, I guess we'll open with that. Well, Beto, I'll just ask you first, and then we'll get into it. What do you think here? That's your question, but what's your answer to it? Is intervening, does a government have a duty to intervene in foreign affairs to any degree or at any time or at any point? What do you think?
I don't see where they are granted the authority with individual sovereign nations. I don't understand how sovereignty could be a concept that is only upheld by people not willing or capable of fighting back against attacks against its sovereignty. Interventionism is only possible because the countries we attack are not capable of declaring war. So we obligate them to whatever harm we cause them. So I guess I don't believe in interventionism because it doesn't follow. It's not self-consistent. We can't hold ourselves to something that we don't hold other countries to.
So just in like the most defensible examples, like for example, the Bosnian genocide, where both of those countries are incapable of fighting back against America. We deem one of them to be the morally, righteous one that is being acted upon, and we decide to defend them. Just because those people couldn't declare war on America, would you then be against then the stopping of said genocide, just on principle?
No, because I believe that, or actually, I don't know for a fact, were they asked in any capacity to come to the aid of the people who are being...
Let's just say they weren't. I mean, I think they were, but let's say they weren't. Let's say they were just getting acted upon and they didn't ask for help. Like, even if we just see it as a moral injustice, like, do you not think that we should go in and help those people? Just because they couldn't fight back and the Serbians can't fight back. I mean, it seems like a very, like, when I said brain rot at the beginning, I know Tim took issue with that. But the reason I do is because this is such a dogmatic, absolutist take that doesn't make any sense. There are clearly reasons where you would, in real life, act upon someone. Like if two kids were fighting, you break up those two kids. Just because they couldn't beat you up doesn't mean that you shouldn't help the one who might be being acted upon. It's just a very... I can't do this because acting upon another person is bad in principle, which doesn't really make much sense to me. I think with the power to help someone, we should help someone. That's a very easy take for me.
So let me pose that a different way. Okay. are we the ultimate, is this country the ultimate decider of when we should be able to go in and use force to stop two other people from shooting at each other? So let's say, pick two random countries. Let's say that Luxembourg decided to fight whoever their closest neighbor
Belgium.
is. Belgium, yeah. It's a silly example, right? Because Luxembourg is too tiny to care. But let's say those two countries were fighting each other. Is it up to us our president get to sit in the Oval Office and go, you know what, I'm going to go send the 82nd Airborne and sort this stuff out? Or should there be a coalition of nations that gets to decide, hey, look, let's put some stuff out. Let's actually, discuss this, try to get people to back off, and then send in force. Too often what we do is go, you know what, it's Tuesday afternoon. I think it's time to kind of, these guys have been at it for a long time, and now it's time. They finally crossed the line. Now we're going to go in. And we do that stuff unilaterally. And that to me is the problem, is that we shouldn't be the final arbiters of what every other nation does.
I agree. In an ideal world, this could be something that's more based on coalitions. And for example, the Bosnia genocide wasn't a strictly U.S. unilateral thing. This was like based on agreements from the NATO and UN and assisting and saying, hey, U.S., you are part of this. We're going to be using your military to do this. The unfortunate reality is we are the biggest military and we are the most powerful country. And if you say, oh, well, we shouldn't be, like, maybe I can imagine a world where the U.S. Is able to do the best things and none of the bad things because we're beholden to these other countries. And I might agree that's probably better. Although some might argue that the ability to veto and people like, when we're in these big coalitions and other countries can vote down what would otherwise be a just thing in your and my eyes is kind of bogging it down in bureaucracy. Maybe the trade-offs of the bad things we do aren't worth the good things that we can do by subverting the UN. But that's kind of ignoring the fact that, like, this still means that because we can, we should. You're kind of just bearing the lead of, well, I'd rather live in a world where the U.S. wasn't the most powerful military.
That's not what I said at all. Right? That's you twisting my words. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm not trying to straw man you. That sounded like what you were trying to say, but please clarify.
I'm not saying at all that we shouldn't be in a position we're in. I'm saying we shouldn't decide for other people what their future holds. That we should not be the final line in the sand that says, hey, I'm going to go off and do things, and if the U.S. likes me, I'm okay, and if the U.S. doesn't like me, I'm totally screwed because they're the big kids in the room, right? So. Because what that does is it sits on a very slippery moral slope that says because we're the biggest and we're the nastiest, militarily speaking, or could be, we have the right to tell everybody else on the planet what they should and shouldn't do, because if you don't pay attention to us, we're going to come beat you up, right? That's the problem to me. That it's not. I'm not saying we shouldn't have that power. I'm saying we should never ever freaking use it without a coalition of nations behind us to say, let's go do it. And yeah, if you come up with examples where we've had coalitions, we've gone in, for instance, Gulf War I, where Bush Sr. had pretty much every nation on the planet agreeing this needed to happen. Gulf War II, completely different world. But Gulf War I, we had a large coalition of nations behind us in that case. And we went in and we did what needed to do. World War II, we had a coalition of nations behind us that said we need to go do that. We were attacked, they were attacked, we went out and solved that problem, ultimately, after millions upon millions of lives lost. Now, since then, we have all these little pop-up things where we love to like drone people and do other things because we decided on a Tuesday afternoon that person was, a bad person. That to me is the problem. And that is a very moral gray area that we should just step back from. Because as we go into these things where we do decide to get involved, we're not really good at it, and we're really terrible at regime change. Because what we do is we fly in on helicopters, bomb the crap out of things, set up things, and then we fly back out. And in that vacuum, worse things could potentially come in than were there before. So we do it wrong because we kind of do it on our own. And then when international pressures come in behind us and go, oh, you shouldn't do that. We back out. Okay, that's fine. We shouldn't have been there. We left. But we got to stop this let's intervene everywhere all the time thing, because we're really terrible at doing it. And what we're doing is causing problems all over the world.
So just really quick, because it seems like you've baked in like all the worst things into the concept of intervention period, because I agree we are not great at regime change. I agree I don't like the way that we've subverted democracies or used the CIA to coup governments. And when I'm arguing pro-intervention, it's not that that thing is good. It's that intervention in general is something I think we have a responsibility to. And just because maybe we will have a check or a balance on that, which I might agree with, does not mean that we should just be anti-intervention. So what I would ask you is, like, are you anti maybe US aid? Are you anti-less, like, any sort of soft power that we do? Are you strictly anti-regime change? Because we might agree more than we disagree here.
So I think we should stay out of. So it's a little bit different when you get into the sort of the soft arguments, right? So should we be able to go into other countries and educate their population, help them with whatever they ask for help with? Sure. Should we go in and force that? That's another question. So let's say we go into a country and they say, we don't want your US aid. Do we force it upon them?
No, I don't think so.
Well, okay, but there are examples of when we do that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, if you don't take our aid, we won't help you over here, right? So we kind of do
hold on, yeah, Tim. Just for the sake of the conversation, I want to get the other players in as well at a certain time. Can you give us an example where we forced our aid upon a country that just didn't want it?
I'll have to think about it for a minute because I'm sure there's an example, but I'm not coming up with one on the top of my head. But I know the federal government does it with states all the time, where it's like, oh, we'll restrict your highway money unless you do something the way we want it to, right? Which does rip away states' rights. And I'll let other people respond while I think of an example of that, but that we've done on an international level. But I do know that the CIA, you brought them up, we have been involved in how do we go in and affect the outcome of international elections. But then at the mere thought that Russia might actually, and I'm not saying Russia should be able to, and I'm not saying we should do it, but at the mere thought that, oh, Russia might have bought some campaign ads for somebody, then we all, throw a hissy fit. Well, we're doing it around the world, right? We're putting in campaign ads all over the world.
Bill Clinton
or we're putting money into campaigns for people we think should win. But when people do it here, well, no, you shouldn't do it. We should do it, but not you. Right? That's one of those times when I think we become very arrogant. But I'll let other people talk, and I'll think about your
question. That's all good. I want to hear from Lonerbox and Beto, and we'll get into it. Right?
I mean, it's probably better. So when we're talking about coalitions, obviously that could be NATO, it could be the Security Council, although it seems like even seeing whether or not it's unilateral doesn't necessarily always map onto how successful or justified the act was, right? Because Kosovo did not have approval from the Security Council. It was a NATO act, just NATO, mostly spearheaded by the United States. And that was like one of the most successful interventions by any country on anywhere ever. Like Kosovo is probably one of the most pro-American countries in the fucking world. It's probably more pro-America than America is. Whereas
we don't have a Bill Clinton street here.
Yeah, you don't name your kids Bill Clinton, right? Or Tony Blair. Yeah. Whereas Libya did have approval from the Security Council, and it was a total disaster. So obviously it is better to have some kind of like international approval, but then I think with examples in the 90s, one of the reasons that America was so impatient when it came to Kosovo was because of the failures of the international community to intervene in Rwanda. Like that was already still fresh in people's memories. So international like barriers can actually be a very obvious hindrance in hindsight. So it's quite difficult to always ascertain, which is why I think it's always better just to go with case-by-case examples, because it's like you were saying earlier as well when you were talking about, it felt like you were kind of going a little bit fast and loose between regime change on the one hand, but then also like random drone strikes on the other. Obviously, these are two like very, very different acts. So I'm just wondering, like, is there any particular intervention in recent years or something historical that we want to argue over? Because I think when we speak broadly like this, it's much harder to grasp exactly, like, obviously the drone striking Syria is very different from intervening in Ukraine, or bombing Iran for a day is different from the Iraq war. So
actually, Tim, before you answer, can I give what I think you're trying to say and tell me if this is wrong? Because this might be an answer to what Lonerbox is saying. And interrupt me whenever you want. But is your idea that, like, because we do have this unilateral power, even though we could look at this at a case-by-case basis and point to some of these things as successful and probably morally just, because that also comes with all of the negative side effects, that it shouldn't be on us ever, and it should always be kind of this coalition thing? Is that more or less your position?
Yeah, I think we should focus more on getting those sorts of international coalitions, because, like, when you look at, like, go back to the when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. We went in and basically executed Gaddafi. We kind of threw him out of office, and he wound up being executed as a result of that. And then, the Secretary of State comes out and goes, "Oh, we came, we saw, he died," right? And there was sort of this bragging moment of that. Is it really on us to decide, hey, look, that's a bad leader, we're going to throw his butt out and let you guys fill the vacuum with whoever you want?
Well,
now,
as Lonerbox said, that was a coalition. That wasn't a unilateral.
It was not only was it a coalition, it was also the Security Council was in favor of it as well. I think Russia abstained, but even the Security Council approved Libya.
They were okay, but we sucked at it, right? We didn't really finish the job. We kind of just went in and said, "Okay, great, you got a new country. Have a nice day." Right, back out.
Right, but is every failure now the mark of whether or not we should ever try ever again, or because that was so bad we should never intervene? Like, if that had happened before Kosovo and the NATO had said maybe we should go in and help there, would you say, well, no, because look how bad Libya went? Or should we try to learn from our mistakes and still intervene? I mean, this is what I mean when I'm like, it's brain
also
rot where you take...
It's also this, like, each of these countries are obviously very, very, there's a lot going on, right? For however horrible Libya became, we don't know what would have happened had Gaddafi just continued his onslaught against the rebels, right? He was literally, the way he was talking, it sounded like he just wanted to murder all of them, right? Like he was calling them like sewer rats and rolling tanks towards Benghazi, I think it was, and basically saying that they were going to like give them no quarter. So what Gaddafi would have done in a civil war in order to keep power it could have been worse than what we ended up having. It's also not to mention that Libya, the NATO and Western intervention was one side of the coin. Another side of the coin as well is that General Haftar has been backed by Russia. You got Wagner Group in there, and those guys did not have Security Council approval for what they did. That was completely unilateral. So, like, yeah, I think like the way that people talk about Libya or any of these interventions, like, it's also worth taking into consideration quite a few of the details behind how it happened and who else was involved.
And we need to have a longer, if we're going to do these things, we have to have a longer term vision. The United States longer term vision is, okay, let's get to the next election cycle. Right. So we have to get out of that mindset if we're going to keep doing this stuff, because it can't be like take when we pulled out of Gulf War II when Biden took office. It was horrible the way we left. Right. It was just absolutely terrible. We shouldn't have been there in the first place, but we were, and we decided to go in and do what we did. And then when we pulled out, the whole thing just kind of did not go as planned. So if you're going to go in and say, hey, look, we need to be intervening all over the place, you got to have a plan, long-term vision plan that says, let's stay involved all over the place. It can't be like, okay, we'll go put out this hotspot, now put out that hotspot, move over here, move over there. It's like, trying to cauterize pop-up wounds all over the world. It doesn't really work that way.
Well, that's why I guess maybe I'm confused, and I don't know if Lonerbox you are too, but like, what's your real position then? Because it seems like you're pointing to the failures of our intervention and saying these are bad, which obviously we all agree on in hindsight. But then you're saying that we should only ever intervene when a coalition approves it, even when coalitions get it wrong too. Nothing's going to be perfect. America's absolutely far from perfect. You'll never find a greater America critic. Well, not maybe a greater one, but I criticize America fairly frequently. And to say that like because we get things wrong, because a coalition get things wrong, that like, are you saying we should never intervene? Are you saying that all failures that we've ever done are indications of future...
So let me back up a level and say here's my main thought on it. Why is it our job every time to go off and cost American lives to solve other people's problems on an ongoing basis?
Have you seen Spider-Man? There's a famous line, and Uncle Ben says, with great power comes great responsibility. And unfortunately, Burundi cannot intervene in Libya because Burundi is a weak little tiny country. But we have the greatest military in the world, and we, for better or for worse, are going to use that on other people. And I'm joking a little bit and libbing out by comparing this to a Marvel movie. But unironically, when we do have the ability to fix or even worsen problems, that's going to fall on us. And other countries simply don't have the capability of doing that. Like even NATO in and of itself, it's mostly us. It is primarily funded by us. That's why Trump complains about that these other countries don't pay their fair share. But that ends up being that like our country is the one that has the power to go and do these regime changes. When NATO said go to Bosnia and intervene, had NATO the power to ask a country that was just as capable as us, they probably would have. But unfortunately, the block stopped with us or whatever because we were the ones who could. we could say, like, in a world where everyone had equal footing, why is America the one doing it? Sure, but it's not equal footing. We are the biggest, most powerful military in the world.
It's also like some of those complaints are valid. Like European countries have finally, I think, realized that they have been slacking in large part because of their defense contributions. And now suddenly you've got all these intel assessments and constitutional changes, like in Germany, like all saying that, yeah, like each of these countries in Europe, especially the NATO members, they do need to pull their weight a lot more. That has been a problem. But it's also for the same reason that like Europe is obligated to, as well as America is. We are the largest, most successful economies in the world. We are the countries where you can grow up and you can be anyone you want to be, basically, if you work hard enough. And like that's not disconnected from military presence around the world as well. Like it's not a coincidence that America's got bases all over the world and has military deals with like Southeast Asia or a presence in the Middle East or anywhere else. Like they're connected, right? Because economies are built up by international trade, and international trade benefits people at home as well. Like if you got the USD and the strongest currency and everything like that, you can't really disconnect. You can't really have that situation where America is just isolating and China is the one using troops all over the world to get their way, right? Like that wouldn't work.
Vito,
that's kind of
step in.
Yeah, sorry, I was just listening, thinking, watching. My problem, I guess, with interventionism is that if we don't intervene in every genocide, because we haven't, right? Every genocide that's occurred, we haven't. How can we be sure that we're not only acting in self-interest and rationalizing what we've done, like post doing it? How can we be sure that what we're doing is the correct thing if we don't have a consistent way in making that decision? We just attempt to justify it as it's happening, because that's all I see happening.
To be clear, you're not wrong. If you look at USAID and if you look at like a lot of our military intervention, this is not some moral like thing that's coming from the top down of like, well, it's the right thing to do. As much as I wish it was, we don't stop the Uyghur like persecution in China. One, because China has nukes. We don't save the denizens of North Korea because they have nukes as well. We do it for our own self-interest. USAID is not because we love giving out aid. It's because the countries that we give aid to are then beholden to us, and that's good for the U.S. Now, you can say that's a bad reason, and I might agree with you. But if the differences between that, and I think we didn't really touch on this as much, but if we don't intervene, given all our power, the people who do intervene either will not have our interest, maybe not our morals, if that's China or Russia, as Lonerbox pointed out. They also will then have those relationships with these countries that might benefit them, whether that be resources, peoples, or whatever other thing that like becomes a mutually beneficial relationship. We're ceding all of that. Now, yes, I wish we were just a moralistic country that stopped every genocide because genocide is bad. We don't. I think we were very inactive in the Rwandan one, if I'm not mistaken, or at least NATO or the UN was very slow to react to that. Now, yeah, I wish we did things nicer. We don't. But that's just kind of how America works. It's how nice global things work.
It's more so the dishonesty of it. The idea that like what they're saying is that they're doing it for one reason, but it's clear that if they were to do it for that reason, it wouldn't have been done in the way they did it, right? Like diplomacy would have been,
you're right. Like obviously, I'm pretty sure Clinton's big push to go into Kosovo, like his deciding factor. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was because of the Lewinsky scandal. I think that probably had a strong motivation.
What do you think Iran was?
I don't know, but the point is, if we're talking about, say, with Kosovo, for that example, let's say it definitely was. Let's say it was definitely Clinton just trying to get rid of the Lewinsky scandal or to bury it. I mean, do you think people in Kosovo care? They don't give a fuck. They got saved, right? So I don't know why Trump decided to her. Yeah, I don't know why Trump decided to bomb Iran. Like, I don't know what's going on in his head. It's probably just like that meme with the monkey crashing cymbals together. But obviously, like, what matters is like whether or not the act was justified or not. That's kind of.
Do you think it was just on to narrow in on that, because you said it's helpful to talk in specific examples. So I'm just very curious on your take here, Lonerbox. Do you think it was justified that Donald Trump went in and bombed the nuclear facilities in Warsaw and the other sites that he did when it comes to Iran? Iran, I don't know if I know.
I think so as far as America's contribution to it, I think a lot of the, like, my high conviction take on that is probably going to hinge on like details that are not going to be agreed upon for years. But based on what we know now, I'm probably leaning towards yes, it was justified. Yeah.
So let me put I actually am a physicist hat on for a second when it comes to the whole Iran thing, because my background is in physics. I've got a PhD in it, and I worked in it forever. Because you can see gray hair. I'm just happy I still have hair at this point. But when it comes to should we or shouldn't we have bombed Iran, so their underground nuclear facilities are what we claim to be the problem, because we don't want them to have nukes. So let's talk about nukes for just a second, okay? One has the only time they've been dropped in anger was at the end of World War II. And, you can talk about whether or not that was justified all day long, and that's a whole different stream we could have for hours and hours and hours. And I would argue that it was incredibly justified, because while it did cost lives, it actually, in the end, a lot fewer people died as a result of dropping those nukes versus not. Now, in the modern sense...
Can we pause on that real quick? Because if you
Sure.
agree with dropping the nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which I think is a very contentious take, and also, as much as they were military cities, killed a lot of civilians and could have been dropped in ways that were maybe just as threatening to that place. That was not a coalition. That was a unilateral decision from the American government to murder tens of thousands of civilians to end a war, and for a utilitarian reason that you might be able to justify. But that's kind of all American intervention now.
So
you're applying current morality to those decisions in the past that war include. Go on.
Let me take this. World War II was a case in which nobody in a modern sense, unless you've read a lot of history books, really has an effective take on. Okay. I've met a number of World War II veterans. My grandparents were World War II veterans. I've talked to a bunch of them at length. I am too young to even come close to remembering it, right? And I was born in 1972. But we love to kind of, hand wash it now and go, well, World War II, we did this, World War II, we did that. And we use that to justify stuff. That is a much different conflict than anything we see today. If you look at the number of people that died, percentage-wise, it's up to, measurable percentage of global population died during that conflict. Us dropping nukes at the very end of it was because the world needed to move the hell on and get out of that conflict. That everybody needed to say, it's over, let's be done, let's move out. Okay, so it is a much different world than we have today. Shockingly different.
Sure.
Now, would I have made that decision if I were the president? I don't know, because I wasn't alive in the 1940s. But if you look backwards and say how many lives would have been cost, military, civilian, blah, 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 you go down that list. If you do any set of the math on it, anybody I've talked to who's strategic in nature, sort of, military officer that's looked at this kind of stuff, has said, you can sit both sides of it, but it's probably 60-40 in favor of it saved lives. Can I argue the other 40%? Sure. But in a modern sense, it's a different world when you drop nukes, because here's why. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the size of those nukes were vanishingly small compared to today's. They were
sure. Sorry, just to be clear, I wasn't saying that you would be in favor of dropping nukes now. What I'm saying is the moral calculus that you just described is exactly what every American, president or government does in order to say, hey, is it worth doing this regime change, as awful as that might be? They're doing it also, one, out of American interest, but two, to say, well, if we don't do this, then this horrible, awful dictator is going to kill everyone. It seems like that's almost on our side.
At the end of World War II, it was the Department of Post-Crime. What you're talking about is the Department of Pre-Crime. Right, so you're trying to say,
they were saying we would have had
exactly
to do a land invasion and they wouldn't surrender otherwise, which will kill X million American troops and Japanese civilians. Therefore, it is okay, trolley problem-wise, to do this. And that's, again, what we do here. There's already wars happening. There's genocides happening. There's places where we're intervening. It just seems like not much has changed. It seems like your argument as to why this is different is just the scale would have been much bigger. And I don't think that's a very strong reason to be pro.
The scale was shockingly different. So let's take it another way. But if you want to talk about scale, so a bank got robbed in Dallas today. Now, for all banks are going to have this new draconian security problem that you can't get inside without fingerprint, blood samples, 2 stool samples submitted to make sure you actually belong in there, right? So you can have a scale argument all day long, but World War II was a massively different scale than anything you see today. Could I come up with other ways to solve the problems we have today? Sure. Could I have come up with other ways to solve the problems we had during World War II? I can't. Okay. There's a big difference in between.
I do want to kind of get us back on track a little.
Yeah, sorry, that was my tangent.
Yeah, I was trying to go back to Iran.
It's fine. Yeah. Go.
The point with Iran.
Briefly. Yeah.
There's 2 kinds of nuclear weapons in the world, right? There's the kind you make with plutonium and the kind you make with uranium. And to get uranium out of to
Enrich.
Purify uranium enough to get to weapons grade. It's a whole huge problem involving centrifuges because all uranium chemically kind of acts the same. So you need different weights, and it's a whole different physical separation process than it is otherwise. And the reason Iran, we've not wanted them to have nuclear reactors over the years is because when you run a nuclear reactor, one of the byproducts you get out of the toxic waste, let's talk about the radioactive waste, is plutonium. That's your other type of bomb, right? So to get the plutonium out of the radioactive waste is a chemical process, not a physical separation process. So one of the things that has always concerned me about the Iranian nuclear program is to build a plutonium bomb in the 1940s was shockingly difficult. Now it's kind of known. Lots of people know how to do it. It's not as technologically challenging as it was the first time. It's physics. You can't uninvent physics. Anybody can do the math and figure it out. Now, to build one of those, at least a primitive one, that's pretty easy if you have the material. Getting the material is very easy. Building a uranium bomb is shockingly easy to do, but getting the material is really hard. So is everybody here aware that the world's first test of a uranium bomb was actually in Japan?
Mm-hmm.
They never tested them in the desert.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that?
I do now. I actually was not aware of the distinction.
That's how easy they are to set off, because you just need two subcritical masses. You smack them into each other hard enough. Boom, you get a nuclear reactor reaction and it goes off.
Okay.
Plutonium bombs are the implosion devices, a lot trickier to make. Now, the uranium program, the Iranian program.
Let's into interventionism. Like the history lesson is great, right? With the physics and stuff like that. But I want to know, should we have bombed Iran?
We should have taken care of Iran 20 years ago. Now the only alternative left is just to destroy the crap out of their nuclear program. But 20 years ago, we kind of let it go. Huh?
So you are pro bombing Iran. Intervention to bomb Iran.
There's a difference between intervening and putting troops on the ground and boots on the ground and all that kind of stuff and dropping some bunker busters.
Define the difference.
I'm not sure we hit it. So.
Yeah, so you're just anti-American lives being risked? As long as Americans can do it from a desk or from a plane, it's totally okay? I'm confused, because this is now completely different from an intervention question.
Well, there's also
like you're pro-intervention.
See, nuclear is a whole different world. I don't think it actually falls in the let's go and deal with regime change and all this other crap. We should have handled it a very long time ago with an international coalition to get in there and actually solve this problem. And we didn't do it. We kind of went, oh, that's a lot of work. I don't really want to feel like it. And now we've got
the regime change that we did in Iran that didn't end up working out.
No, we shouldn't go in it. I'm not pro us changing other people's governments. I don't think we should play the role of we get to decide what government you have.
Well, unless we're about to decide whether or not they have a nuclear bomb. I'm so confused as to what your actual position. It seems like we should, like us, it's a case by case subject for you, which is what our position is.
Right. Changing a regime is not the same as, hey, okay. And also look at it another way. Iran with nuclear weapons has had stated purposes for them for years. They're like, hey, I know how I want to use it, right? We know exactly where we want to put them and where we want to set them up. That to me is freaking scary. Like the North Koreans, they have nuclear weapons and they don't really have a plan to use them. They just have them there to kind of flex strength. Iran has,
but how is this providing evidence for our side? We're just kind of, I'm not attempting to be rude. I'm just saying that we're giving history lessons when the point is what we should be arguing against.
Wait, so is there anyone on this panel who opposes the strikes on Iran?
I can bring on.
Yes, I do.
Okay,
yes,
okay.
I do.
Is it like a 1v3?
My opposition is
devil's advocate.
No, it's not devil's advocate. It's
no. I'm asking Wick because obviously I don't think Wick knew that.
Like I said, this is a tough one to book. I got someone coming. Don't worry, we'll grab a non-interventionalist here, right?
If I can get a word in.
Yeah, I understand, right? That we all have different thresholds, and I think even the most staunch anti-interventionalist would have some threshold, like if the world would be thrown into chaos unless we kill this one individual with a drone strike, then we should do that. But the question becomes, right, I think, has the U.S. in the modern post-World War II been better, or has its interventions largely been good for the world, or has its interventions largely hurt the world, and or made the world worse, right? And it's going to be non-smoker. Don't worry, Zephyr Hash. He's coming. He's getting his stuff set up, and he'll be here. But that's the question at hand, and that's what I want to kind of discuss and want to talk about, right? Because I think that there is a open question, like some interventions good, some interventions bad. How has the U.S. handled itself as a world power? If it has been positive for the world, then we should probably continue to be so. If it has been negative for the world, we should probably take it away. I think that the biggest drain or the biggest negative, the biggest knock on American hegemony has been in the last 20 years, right? Our intervention in the Iraq War was devastating, right? We probably should not have gone in there.
Is war interventionism?
It
Yeah.
can be.
Is it?
Depends on the.
It's not
depends on the
always.
If we're not
Like,
if we're
if
not
you
a
were
direct
attacked,
player
you
that's
were at
being
war,
attacked,
but you didn't
yeah.
intervene, right?
Would the Iraq War not be a direct player? Like I'm not trying to contradict you. I'm just trying to understand what interventionism is then, because I thought it was
So
something
the Iraq
different from
War was predicated on the idea that they might attack us using WMDs that we fabricated with the intelligence community, but like theoretically, that's not intervention if they had directly attacked us first, like with Japan in 1941, right? So it depends entirely on if you were, I guess, hit first, or if you're declaring war and there's like a back and forth instead of us just going into some foreign country and doing whatever we want there. That's kind of the distinction.
I think we're doing that though, and we're calling it interventionism, but we are doing whatever we want because we're not asking them if we could do that when we enter these countries, like when we bomb Iran. You know,
No, yeah,
we didn't,
no, absolutely. That is intervention. I wouldn't consider
Right.
that like because they're not attacking us really. I mean, I guess if
So
you want
I
to call
think
them
if the
shooting missiles at
justifica-
our embassies, that's kind of a back and forth, but not really. Like
I think if we think we have justification for military action in any capacity, that we should just not be, half-assing military action, and we should declare war, or it shouldn't be a big enough problem that diplomacy can't handle it. I think if we decided to bomb Iran and they decided to declare war, there was potential for more death to come than one Iranian nuclear bomb created by a program that's been trying to create one forever. The damage that they would cause with that one bomb, one, is uncertain because they would immediately give it up the second that they used it, and then they would give up their entire, ability to defend themselves. And then two, the war could last for just as long as the Afghan or Iraq wars, but Iran is a much more cohesive and, unified government and military. It would be more devastating.
The justification for whether or not we should strike Iran is completely contingent on if you believe the, I guess, right-wing narrative might not be right, but the narrative that the instant they got one, they would try to wipe Israel off the map, which I'm not really sure if that's the case, but if it's true, then it's completely justified. But yeah, Lonerbox might know more about that than I am because, they say a lot of stuff, but I'm not entirely sure they wouldn't just use it defensively like North Korea, so.
I don't think you have to
believe that.
I don't think you
Sorry,
have to
go ahead.
believe they were definitely going to use the nuke as soon as they got it. You don't have to believe that. You just have to understand that given their rhetoric, given their displays of intent with the supporting the proxies, and given the fact that it's a nuclear weapon, then even like a 1% chance of them actually getting it and using it right away is like, to me, that's enough. I don't know why like a threatened country should actually pay that price for that behavior. Like,
What was the potential death toll in the war that could have been caused by the attack?
Wait, quick question. Why is Israel's rhetoric not like indicative that they're going to use nuclear weapons, which they already have?
Because they don't test ballistic missiles and say that they're specifically being tested to point at this particular country. It seems that with Israel, Arab neighboring countries have choices. They can recognize Israel and make peace deals, and they have done with Egypt and Jordan, and obviously Israel's not really causing much of a fuss with the Emirates or Saudi or Bahrain or anyone else. With Iran, their hatred for Israel is unconditional, all the way back to Khomeini's governance of the jurist, which is kind of like the ideological foundation for the IRGC and for the regime. They believe that the Islamic world has been at war with Jews for over 400 years, that it was Jews who started to break down and fracture the Islamic world with propaganda, and the first path to redemption for the Islamic world is to overcome the little Satan, which is Israel. So that's like... there's not really anything Israel can do to stop that from happening.
Memo? Are you familiar with the clean break memo from the 90s?
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, I guess that's what I mean by Israel's rhetoric. I mean, if you look at Israel's rhetoric under Netanyahu, they've kind of expressed a clear preference for regime change around the Middle East.
Right. So
they're
do you
allowed to
understand
have
that?
nuclear
I'm
weapons.
sure we agree that
There's no
regime
restrictions
changes
on that, and they're not even part of the NPT like Iran is.
Yeah. So
why is that okay? But Iran is not allowed to have nuclear weapons, which, by the way, they're not even trying to develop. But that's
Okay.
another argument.
All right,
I'm
that's
saying
like
hypothetically.
3 points at once. But okay, first of all, I didn't say it's okay that Israel has nuclear weapons. The whole point of non-proliferation is that for better or worse, countries already have nuclear weapons. You just don't want to add more countries to the list because every country you add to the list of countries that have nuclear weapons, you are increasing the chances that one regime change or one coup or one snap from a dictator will set them off and destroy the entire planet. Not least of all a country.
Why are we so different?
Why are we so different? What do you mean?
We're not different is his point.
Are we not?
I'm saying we're not
situation here?
different.
Oh,
We're
okay,
not
okay,
different.
okay,
So,
okay.
but the problem
Sorry.
is that once a country has nukes, it's kind of hard to get rid of them, right? Whereas it's easier to stop other countries from getting nukes. That's the whole principle of non-proliferation. So I don't think Israel should have got nukes in the way that they did. Of course not. I'm pro NPT, but they have them now.
Who benefits the most from new countries not getting nukes?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Why is that? Why?
Because every time you introduce one extra country to the list of countries that have nuclear weapons, every country, especially countries that can be volatile, you are increasing the risk that one of these countries will go through some chain reaction of events that sets it off and actually results in the first use of nuclear weapons.
Do you believe that nukes are the largest ever weapon that will ever be created? Could something worse happen?
Does that matter? I'm sure something worse could happen. Yeah.
I don't know if there needs to be a larger weapon, but okay. So
I was addressing a million things at once there.
Hold on. One at a time. Let Lonerbox finish his thought, then we're gonna give it to non-smoker. Sorry, I forgot blanking on your name. Sorry, I got a.
Yeah, I was addressing a few things at once there. First of all, the clean break memo. Okay, we can go into how much this was actually like any state policy from Israel or America or anything. We can go into the details if you want, but at the end of the day, even if I take your word for the clean break memo, we can say that we can agree that wanting regime change in countries that say they want to destroy you as a country is probably a bit different from just wanting to unconditionally destroy a country. These are not the same thing. In any case, as for Iran and whether or not they were pursuing nuclear weapons, you were very confident in saying that they definitely were not. I don't maybe want to understand why you seem to disagree with the words of the IAEA or anyone else who was actually involved in assessing that from Iran, because they did not say they're definitely not building weapons. They said that because of the restrictions on inspection rights and surveillance from these organizations, they could not make a determination on whether or not Iran was developing weapons or not, because there are plenty of facilities and underground areas, even next to Natanz, that are not fully accounted for. So that's not.
But this has been an ongoing discussion, as I'm sure you're familiar with, for years. The projections were at one point Iran would have the capability of producing nuclear weapons as early as 2012. When they first signed on to the original nuclear deal with the Obama administration, the Iranians were regularly met with inspections from the IAEA, and they were always consistently maintaining all of the limits of that agreement. They only exceeded the limits imposed by that agreement on uranium enrichment as soon as Trump pulled out of the original nuclear deal. And then they accelerated enrichment of uranium after the assassination of Soleimani. So it was only put forward by the IAEA just recently that the Iranians might be non-compliant in terms of enriching uranium well past the point that was acceptable. But there was never any confirmed evidence that the Iranians were trying to develop a nuclear weapon. The inference one could make is that they're trying to enrich uranium more and more and more as a negotiating tactic to force the U.S. back to the table to sign another agreement, which it looked like they were almost successful in doing. That wasn't until Israel attacked them.
Okay, so just for, again, one thing at a time, you were talking about...
I do want to get Soypill in after
you. Okay, I'll just address one of those because, again, it's always like 5 points at once. But the idea that they were enriching to 60% and also increasing their stockpile by about 50% within a period of a few months, just as a negotiating tactic. I mean, I don't know if like what world we're living in where Iran's negotiating tactic is not only to show that they can enrich uranium, but also to produce at such a rate that they were sacrificing their own civilian uranium stockpiles because how do you get 60% enriched uranium? You go from 19.5. You go from your civilian reactor uranium to enrich. So the fact that they were actually sacrificing their civilian stockpile of uranium just as a negotiating tactic, I mean, you can say that Iranians are like deranged, like they're morons, but I mean, come on, like you can say that was a negotiating tactic, the fact that they would sacrifice the civilian program just to accelerate and enrich at that rate in that quantity, or you can think maybe there's something slightly different going on there.
I mean, there's
behind the amount that they're doing it.
That the Iranians have uranium stashed places and are enriching in places that inspectors are not aware of or that they can't find. So if the Iranians just wanted to enrich as quickly as possible to reach over the 90% threshold, don't you think they probably would have just done that underground and not shown the inspectors instead of showing the inspectors that they were enriching past 60%?
Okay, so the things that the inspectors can notice is enrichment and centrifuges. That seems to be the one thing that they do have quite like the access to. Now, you're right about storage, but again, I don't know what world we're in where they can actually get away with taking a few, like the number of centrifuges required to go from 60 to 90 and that not get noticed, because obviously you can detect enriched uranium in particles. So I think it makes sense that they would go up to 60. And again, whether that was saber rattling or not, we don't know. The IAEA said they don't know. They don't have the information.
Well, no. So, none of us know. I'm just saying it's an influence.
But who should? So for Israel, okay, them accepting that is like, okay, well, there's a chance here that they're just saber rattling, or there's a chance that they're doing this with the logical conclusion of getting a weapon, and we don't know if they can get to that breakout period and then make the weapon and store it before there's actually a chance to retaliate and stop it. And then the risk is that Iran's got a nuclear weapon now, a country that wants to destroy them. Yeah. So who should pay the price for that behavior?
Yeah, I do want to give other people a chance in here because I brought non-smokering because it was a little mixed up on stances here, but we got some good mix now, and I want to give a chance for Soypill here to get in there. I want Tim to be able to get on here, and Beto to get on here too, and then I'm sure non-smoker will have words for everyone here. But go ahead.
Yeah, Loner pretty much said most of what I was thinking. I mean, it seems like non-smokers being incredibly charitable to Iran, and that might be the case. He might not be wrong. Maybe they are just saber rattling. The point is that we don't know. The point is that, like, I mean, it would be just as silly as to me to ask, non-smoker, do you think Israel has nukes? Because Israel said they don't. That doesn't really matter. What matters is the independent investigations that we do. What matters is what we know and how we can act upon that. And the idea that, like, well, they're just, they wouldn't use it if they wanted to. Like, we don't know that. No one knows that. And we, unfortunately, as much as, it sucks, everyone spies on each other, and they've got Mossad people deep into Iran, and they probably know way more than we do. And maybe they're lying. Maybe Israel is lying about Iran's capability. It's completely possible. But all of this to, like, take a step back and say whether or not we should intervene, my stance on this is completely contingent on whether or not we know for a fact that Iran is going to have some sort of chance of getting one and using it. And to just give them the benefit of the doubt is simply not how you do geopolitics with a country that says we want to destroy you.
So I just don't see that like sacrificing the long-term potential diplomacy that could be had by destroying a program that wasn't obviously or proven to be something that we claimed to be it was. We don't know for a fact they were developing weapons, do we? Do we know that for an absolute fact?
No.
Well, I can't fact check the American and Israeli intelligence agency. I can't.
Okay, well, I'm saying I'm saying as somebody who isn't caught up, is that the general consensus is we know this to be true?
In the same way, we couldn't fact check whether or not there were WMDs in Iraq, which turns out in hindsight, we can say, well, that didn't happen. It's very possible they're lying and making this up for their own interests. And it's possible that they were enriching uranium to the point of like,
what you're supporting though is a decision based on
I'm not so to be clear, I don't know. I've said it's completely contingent on the veracity of those statements. And like, if it is, but I have no idea. So I'm not supporting that specific strike.
Not that without specific one, but what you're saying is that the idea of interventionism itself is not harmful.
Yeah, I agree with non-proliferation. Like, I think anyone should.
Okay. Why do you believe that?
Well, so your whole thing
Well,
against it was like, what about the war and how many more people could have died if like that then that the nuke dropped? And that's kind of Truman's calculus and why he dropped those 2 nukes in Japan, because he said, well, the ground war would have been way worse. And whether or not he was right, that's what happened, right?
I just want to know how we quantified it.
Potential. I don't know exactly how they quantify. It's really interesting how intelligence agencies do have plans for almost anything that could happen. I know there was a big stink about what happens if America invades Greenland, and we had a whole plan for it. Now, whether or not we're actually going to do it, I think is probably we're not going to. I hope we're not going to, but they make calculus for all of these things. Like the president probably has like 5,000 briefs on his desk for every possible scenario. What happens if tomorrow China just starts, invading Taiwan, and at the same time Syria has an uprising? Like there are plans for all this. I don't know exactly how they're calculated.
Don't we usually wait for those things to happen first?
No, we absolutely don't wait.
Just real quick, I want to give Tim a chance to get in here, and then
So
go ahead.
Here's the reason I think I have real issues with us intervening all over the world. So today's argument is nuclear weapons, right? And at the end of the day, a nuke is just a gigantic bomb. In fact, we built chemical weapons that are as big as the stuff we dropped in Japan, the Moab, and the Russians have a fuel oil, I forget what it's called, but the Russians have one that's
hypothermic.
Yeah, that's the hypobaric.
Or whatever it's called.
It's massive weapons that are as big as the stuff
thermobaric.
Thermobaric that we dropped in Japan. And yeah, nuclear weapons are incredibly destructive, but they're just gigantic bombs. The radioactive fallout is a problem. It's indiscriminate. Blah blah blah. So that's today's version of intervention. Is we got to go fix that. Well, let me put my scientist hat on. The bigger problem you have, if you look at a potential weapon of mass destruction, is bio and chemical. Like we all kind of learned a lesson with COVID. And I don't want to bring the vid up. That's a whole different video. But where does it stop, right? Today we're saying, oh, let's take out these nuclear facilities because maybe. Well, tomorrow is it, okay, let's go start taking out bio facilities because maybe.
I mean, that's literally what we did in Syria because we thought he had chemical weapons. Whether or not you thought that was true, and there's debates on it, but like this is a thing we do. Yeah, it doesn't stop at nuclear bombs.
But so where's the end of this, right? Are we just going to keep blowing people up forever because that's just the way it works, and humans are humans, right?
That's the plan.
So, I mean, sooner or later you got to say, hey, look, I'm going to declare world peace and take whatever the hell it takes to get there, and
or at
make
least
sure
decide to bomb people for good reasons.
Why didn't we think of that? Look, at this point, Whick TV is officially declaring world peace. Okay?
That's right.
We're declaring it.
World peace.
I said it. All you guys should just lay down your arms. Okay, why are we still fighting? Okay, we're good.
You got to tweet at Israel and Iran right now. Whick.
I will do that. I will at them both, and I'll be like, "Yo, bros, why are you still fighting? I already declared world peace, and we're good, right?"
Yeah. So I do have a response to I think something that was sort of asked to me is about the whole saber rattling versus legitimate threats. Do I know if Iran is just saber rattling, or do I know if their nuclear program is a legitimate threat to world peace? And I would say that my answer to that, I have just as much evidence for my answer as any of you guys. We can go by statements that are made, which, by the way, the Iranians have never, at least the supreme leader has never explicitly stated he wants to destroy Israel in terms of like a nuclear weapon or missiles or anything like that. What the supreme leader has said is that he wants a referendum for the Palestinians to destroy Israel that way. But I would argue that Iran, like every country, has self-interests and cares a lot about building itself up as an economic power and securing its regime through a incredibly powerful military and a secure political system. So given that, the thing that would be in their best interests would probably be removing sanctions, right? That's probably what they're so upset about. So that's probably why they signed on to the original nuclear deal in the first place, to get the sanctions lifted. And then once Trump ripped up the original nuclear deal, or at least U.S. participation in it, thus resulting in sanctions being levied on Iran, and then more sanctions being placed on Iran after the protests in 2023 when that young woman was killed in police custody. That's probably what's making the Iranians so upset, and also wanting to accelerate the enrichment of uranium, sort of as a negotiating tactic to kind of force the Americans into lifting the sanctions. That would make a lot of sense. What wouldn't make any sense is enriching in a big rush to try and build a weapon, which is only going to cause other countries to try and attack them and stop their nuclear program from coming to fruition, or them succeeding and then launching a nuke only to be nuked by us or someone else. So I don't understand how we just
sorry,
assume.
Non-smoker, do you not
Yeah.
understand that once you have the nuke, that is the "you can't fuck with me anymore" tool? Like that's the whole North
Do
Korea.
you not understand that that logic doesn't make any sense? Because if Iran launched a nuke on Israel, do you think the United States? Do you think the United States? Do you think the United States would not nuke Iran?
No, of course there would be some awful nuclear.
Oh, so it's not a permanent deterrent. So it's not a permanent deterrent. Do you think the Iranians don't understand that?
No.
So
Wait, do you think just because Iran would get nuked back means their nuke wouldn't be a deterrent if they had it?
No, I'm saying, of course, they have a nuclear deterrent. I think most countries develop nukes without ever intending to seriously use them because they know that if they did use them,
possibility out when you were saying why they might be enriching. You're like, well, they might be doing it to saber rattle. They might be doing it to bring America to the negotiating table. But you said it's
no. I'm
never
saying
said
they're doing
anything
it
about them possibly using it as a deterrent to stop maybe a regime change or sanctions and say, hey, like maybe you should stop doing this.
Yeah, but where it stands now, they don't need a nuclear weapon to ensure against regime change. Their regime is stronger than ever before.
I mean,
I think the Iranian regime is stronger than ever before.
Trump was very close to
I mean, actually, since Israel strikes, the government has never had more support than it ever has.
How the fuck do you know that? What, the Iranian regime is like one of the most unpopular regimes in the entire world.
Dude, I don't know. Israel killed almost 1,000 people. Israel killed almost 1,000 people in the initial decapitation strikes in the 12-day war in total, many of whom are civilians. That seems to be a common theme with Israel, by the way. Do you think that the people in Iran are like, yeah, fuck that. We're really happy Israel's killing our innocent civilians and blowing up fucking Iranian kindergartens. We totally want regime change now.
I don't know how they feel about their civilians being killed, but they don't like the RGC.
They were protesting in Tehran the day after those decapitation strikes, demanding a military response.
How many people were at those protests? Do you think those protests that the IRGC were protesting?
Count for it to be valid or something like that?
No, wait. I'm just curious.
Dude,
do you think
is a fucking PV event?
Okay? Let Lonerbox finish his question. Lonerbox, finish your question, please.
Do you think that the IRGC is like commands majority support in Iran? You'd be the first.
What do you have? Some stupid fucking retarded poll that proves it doesn't?
I don't even know. Like, I'm pretty sure it's like just like a truism. I didn't even know people debated that. That's surprising to me. Do people debate that? Do people actually think that the IRGC commands majority support in Iran?
Okay, well, could you provide some data? I'm not familiar with that argument.
Do you know the fact that they deal with like
Lonerbox? Before you give data, what's your data other than people were mad that civilians were killed?
I would say that the overwhelming evidence, just in terms of video and photographic
evidence is your evidence. But if he brings up a poll, it's bullshit.
I haven't seen a poll. Have you?
Usually,
any data that he was going to bring up before he.
Let's hear the data. Let's hear the data. You had to interject yourself into this with your nothing fucking statements.
You're making a ridiculous claim that we have to counter with real data.
No, I'm making probably a valid claim that you don't have any evidence to contradict. And
I'm not making a claim. I'm just saying this
so then shut the fuck up. So then shut the fuck up and let
Lonerbox. Okay. Reset. Tim's been trying to get in. Let's give it to Tim, then we'll give it to Lonerbox, and then we'll.
So you said something that I find interesting because I've actually given this a lot of thought because I worked on programs over the years where this was sort of a thing. If Iran built, take any country, let's leave Iran out of this for a second. A country built 2 nuclear weapons and they used both and they had nothing else left in their nuclear arsenal. Do you still think we would nuke? Now, don't answer for Trump. Okay. I want to ask this question in a general way before people jump in. If they have nothing left in their nuclear arsenal, think about the presidents we've had over the last 30 years. I can only think of one if we say, okay, they nuked somebody, but now they have no nuclear weapons left. I could think of one who would definitely nuke back. And I'm not sure I could think of another one in the last 30 years that would actually launch a nuclear attack. So let's say Iran, for instance, develops 5 nuclear weapons and they launch all 5. They set them off all at once. You really think we'd nuke back?
Was that a question for me? I'm sorry.
Everybody. Anybody who wants it.
You don't think we would nuke back somebody who nuked?
I'm not asking. No, I'm asking you the question. You don't get to answer me the question, right? I'm asking it.
I'm asking for clarification.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm asking if what I think you're asking is correct. by restating your question. Is it correct or not?
Sure. Go ahead, restate it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Basically what I'm asking is just, honestly, I'm lost after that.
So do you think if we knew a country had launched all of their nuclear assets, they were done, they couldn't possibly launch another one, would we actually nuke that country back to the Stone Age?
Why wouldn't we?
You're answering a question with a question.
Okay, you're right. We would do it for retribution's sake because governments aren't perfect entities. Right?
So vengeance is mine. We'll just go back and, nuke them back.
I'm not saying it's right, but if we're being pragmatic in everything we talk about and just talking about how things are, then yes, it's exactly what would happen. There would be retribution because the U.S. would never let an attack of 5 nukes go unanswered. That's just not something they would do. That's not something a powerful country should ever allow to happen.
I will say in his defense here, after 9/11, and the attack on the World Trade Centers, if you had asked the American public, like if America could not have done nothing in that instance, if America had done nothing and there'd been no response, the public would not have allowed it, right? It just would not have stood. So in his defense, yes, if America suffered 5 nuclear attacks, the public would demand blood. I don't know if we'd nuke them back to the Stone
would that
Age,
blood
we'd
be
at
in the
least
form
do
of
5
nuclear
nukes
weapons
on
flying
them.
back the other direction? Or would that be in the form of something else?
I think I'm sorry, but this is kind of a pointless hypothetical. I'm not sure entirely. We might not have. No one can really say what we would do. That's kind of a completely unprecedented thing for a modern first world country to be hit by 5 nukes.
Let's take Iran for a minute. Iran, by any stretch of the imagination, taking Iran and the argument that they were going to 60% purification on their stuff just for leverage or whatever. There's no real other reason to purify to that level. Other than to get to nukes faster. That's it, right? You're not quite at nuclear level yet. You've stopped in the middle. You said, hey, I'm at 60. I can keep going, and I can get to nuclear faster now. So there's no reason to do that other than to make people mad at you. And if you look at it from that perspective of
quicker.
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't it also be to attain nukes quicker, not just to make people mad at you?
That's it, right? It's the only way to get there. It gets you there faster, right? So it's starting a fight that you don't necessarily need to start. It's not a good way to solve a problem. It's a way to say, yeah, I intend to get to nuclear weapons. Tough crap. We're going there, right? And I promise I'll stop at 60. That's not the way this stuff works. Because there's no other reason to have that material other than to get to nuclear weapons. So when you're dealing with non-proliferation, that demands, to me, not just the U.S. going, okay, I'm going to bomb you. What we should have done, and what we didn't do, was go and get an actual international coalition, sit at the UN until the UN takes a freaking vote that says, yes, Iran needs to stop and needs to stop today. And we didn't do it. We decided to go, screw all that stuff.
Tim, the problem with that is, and this isn't, again, I'm not in favor necessarily of these strikes, depending on why and what step of the process Iran was, but like, you can't give them this like big warning, like a week ahead of time, like we're gonna come get you, because that is the whole point, is they can move stuff, and there actually are indications that they did. I know exactly, and that's like kind of why you don't. Sometimes you don't have time to get congressional approval. Sometimes
Trump
you don't have time to go through that
by himself.
I'm aware that of the fuck ups.
A lot of other people. That's my
point.
Sure,
but again, what I'm saying is you can't always do that. Sometimes these things require immediate action. Like, what do you do in a situation where hey, if I don't do this right now, we're never going to know where this guy is again?
Like, I mean, it's also the fact that like
to subvert the law.
Well, it's not really. Again, law is always like very, very contested on these issues because there isn't really that much case law for like anticipatory self-defense against a country that may or may not be looking very strongly like they're pursuing a nuclear weapon. We don't really have precedent for that. But although we do have, I think in the Bethlehem Principles, the understanding that the more grave or the more existential the potential threat is, and the more leeway the threatened party has to interpret that threat. And obviously, a nuke is like about as much leeway as you're going to get in terms of interpreting a threat. In any case, the Security Council is not an option because Russia has an interest in keeping Iran afloat because that's what the Shahid drones are quite important to them. As far as looking at other,
force them to have that. It doesn't mean we shouldn't force them to come out and say it. It's like, well, we think Russia will say this, therefore, who cares, right?
It's not about think. We know they will. It's like it's a pointless exercise.
Make them do it publicly. That's my
then
point.
What? Why?
They
like,
publicly
to what end?
They're a public tyranny. They're publicly bad.
Yeah, we all know this.
Yeah.
They
well,
are,
you can
yeah,
even
exactly.
you
They
can even
are
look at
coming
like
out and saying-
you can look at the EU, right? Because all of these European countries that are quite condemnatory of Israel's actions in Gaza. I don't have any of them actually stood against the strikes in Iran. I think maybe Spain might have, or Ireland, but have anyone else? Has like France, Germany, the UK, were they like condemning the strikes on Iran? I don't think they were. In any case, I wanted to go back to Iran first of all to determine the.
Does that validate the decision?
No, I think the decision is validated on the grounds that that Iran was just doing everything that you would do if you wanted to provoke an attack. Like they were fucking around and they were threatening people in a way that puts them in a position where it's like, okay, either I interpret this threat charitably, and the risk is there's a small chance that they get a nuclear weapon and then we're fucked because it just goes underground and we can't stop it, or we bomb them and take out a few sites. Like, I'm sorry, the fact that and Iran puts Israel in that position by threatening them for as long as they have. But in any case, coming back to the IRGC.
To Iran's benefit?
Hold on,
Sorry?
let Loner ask his
I'm
question.
sorry. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm
Coming
sorry.
back to the IRGC, obviously it's quite difficult to get like opinion polling on the popularity of a regime in a totalitarian state, but there are ways that people can measure it. One gauge is voter turnout. Usually, like low voter turnout in these elections is an indicator of like disillusionment with the regime because it's always their candidates. That was at a record high, I think, in 2024. You can also look at presidential candidates because again, it's like that thing where presidential candidates all have some kind of like link to the regime, but if they choose the least hardline regime candidate, that's also a sign that the regime is not very popular because it's like them voting for the only person they can. And they did that with Pezeshkian, right? Because he was once actually banned by the Guardian Council and he ran for president as a moderate, much more moderate than the hardliners who came before him. So that's like a small, I don't know what other indication you want, like other than what's available to us.
Did you see any videos of them in 2024 though? Maybe pictures?
Yeah, I didn't see it. Well, apart from what the nationwide protests that happened every few years. Yeah, I don't know. That were definitely bigger than the pro-regime protests during the bombings, incidentally.
So wait, so just so we're clear, no data?
I guess
no one has. What did I just say? Do you think data is?
It sounded like a lot of ways to say you don't have any.
Yeah. Do you think?
Well,
so do you think there should
actually-
be? So do
wait,
you
hold
think
on,
there should
wait,
be
wait.
data in
No,
a
let Loner
totalitarian
answer.
regime?
No, go ahead.
So do you think we're obligated to say whether a regime is popular or not? We need polling data from that totalitarian regime to determine how popular they are.
Not necessarily. I just think that your claim is
Okay,
as valid
let me
as
go.
mine.
Okay,
They're
let's go.
based
Let's
on
go through.
nothing.
Okay, let's go
Well,
through
hold
one
on,
block
wait,
then.
can I real quick, Lonerbox?
you think
Lonerbox,
hang
can I
on,
real
wait,
quick
no.
something?
I just need to wait one at a time. Do you think
Okay, sorry.
60? Do you think record low voter turnout is a sign of popularity or disillusionment with the regime? Just to
I think low voter turnout
Means
can be a
everyone's
sign of a
chill.
lot of things.
Okay, next one. The fact that they went for a presidential pick who was the farthest away from the regime's norms as possible. Is that a sign of low popularity in the regime?
I don't know, not necessarily. It could mean that they want a more diverse candidate in office for one reason or another. I don't understand all the ins and outs of the Iranian people.
I can tell
and
you
their
know
political
nothing about the
trends.
Iranian regime. Like it's just like it's the least
Well,
contested fact in
you seem to
geopolitics.
have no data supporting your claim before. I'm just trying to clarify.
I mean,
that part.
there are polls that are obviously from
More so
like
for the
anti-regime.
audience than anyone else. That
For
you have
the-
no data.
Well, there is. You can find polling if you want. There are polls that do show record high support. Like,
you're just making broad inferences on other data.
no, I'm being very
to support a
charitable. I'm being
conclusion
very
that you can't
charitable.
support.
I'm being charitable to a campus dipshit who will not accept any polling agency that isn't one that
You're
you
not
already
being
support.
charitable
So
at all. You're
yes, I
expecting
am.
me to be
I'm
charitable.
arguing
Hear
on your
ridiculous
terms.
PV bullshit as
I'm
usual.
arguing PV has nothing to do with how popular the Iranian regime is and how you measure popularity of
All
a
your
regime in a
viewpoints are
totalitarian
sponsored.
state. Really?
And just to be
What's your
clear,
data for that?
non-smoker, there
Yeah,
are
wait.
polls-
Non-smoker. Hey, what's your data for the fact? Do you think I'm paid by PV right now?
I think there's a lot of data showing that you do receive money from PV.
Since when? When?
Since I think the last time that was published was what, like a year ago?
So you think I'm still paid by PV now?
I would assume so.
You
were
assume so?
paid in the
Oh, so you
past.
have. It turns out that you have no data. No data to back up this claim. What do you think PV's?
You've been paid in the past.
Yeah, and on
Are we
PV's
talking
channel, have I
about
when on,
progressive victory in the
and
year
when on
of our Lord
PV's yeah, and when on
2025?
PV's channel did I ever talk about Iran? You realize they uploaded my content. My content for PV is public.
Well,
When did
no,
I talk about
all
Iran?
PV streamers have certain things in common. You guys are neocon libs.
Yeah, they
You always
believe
have
certain
been.
basic truisms like the Iranian regime is not
Like
very
we should-
popular.
we should,
we share some
Iran is so
basically accepted
authoritarian,
truths.
So
Yeah.
we should practice authoritarianism outwardly on the Iranian people.
When did I say that?
Regime change.
When did I say I was pro regime change?
Stupid to organically have a liberal democratic movement in their own country.
When did I say I was pro regime change in Iran?
Victory? Can I ask? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, this guy's like a mental fucking conspiratorialist.
Progressive Victory helped me out financially for my recent video, and I thank them for that. And that's why I believe my Iranian positions, because they paid me to. No, non-smoker. There are polls that you can look up right now that actually support what you're saying.
He doesn't believe any of them though, because they're like State Department.
I know, but I'm just letting him know if he believed in data, which I don't know.
What I'm saying?
There are polls that show the overwhelming support for the military actions in Iran. So you don't need to look at photos and videos. You can just show there are polls.
So wait, so you're talking the MAVA poll? You're talking about that one from the Netherlands?
I'm trying to help you out here, dude. I'm trying to help you out.
See, it's all State Department, right?
Telegram groups, really reliable stuff.
I'm literally trying to help you. This isn't your argument.
I don't need your help.
That you don't have to look at videos and photos. You can look at the people over.
You're such an ineffective
because your current argument is I saw a bunch of photos.
Yeah, but he saw photos. He saw pictures of the protesters, like Trump and his crowd sizes. Okay, now. I'm also just going to say, coming back to talking about Iran's intentions and their ideology, there's nothing more charming than like white Westerners trying to like impose their own ideas on what a foreign regime believes and what they commit to. Iran does want to destroy Israel, like just because I don't know how direct you have it to say when you've got like Khomeini every year at Quds Day, which was, it was an Iranian holiday, by the way, where they say that the Zionist regime is a lethal, a cancerous tumor. It's a cancerous entity in the Muslim world that should be eradicated, where you've got Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini in the 70s in The Governance of the Jurists describing them as wretched, the Jews that started the State of Israel. The fact that even when they were going along with the JCPOA, all of which had restrictions which were temporary, by the way, temporary restrictions. The sanction relief was not temporary, if you bothered to read the thing. And when they went through with the JCPOA, they were still under fire constantly because the whole point of the JCPOA was supposed to be assuring the world that they did not have intentions to carry out wars of annihilation against other countries. And even though they joined the JCPOA, which also involved sanction relief to do with ballistic missiles, like they were happening side by side, and they went and tested a bunch of ballistic missiles and said, yeah, these missiles, they've got Israel's name on it. We're testing the range for Israel, the entity, which will be destroyed one day. And we have a fucking clock that counts down to the destruction of Israel in 25 years, which they first said in 2015. So yeah, I don't know why you have to like superimpose your fantasies onto Iran. It's
interesting because before you dismissed the clean break memo as not being like an explicit outline of foreign policy, but you're taking the Ayatollah's statements at certain events and saying, oh, well, that clearly demonstrates Iran's desire to destroy Israel. But you're also ignoring tons of statements from Netanyahu about comparing Iran to Nazi Germany, speaking at the UN General Assembly, saying that the hour is getting late. We have to stop Iran's nuclear weapons program before it's too late. By the way, that was fucking 13 years ago, inching us ever closer to war with Iran to take out the regime there. Like, that's been a consistent plan from the Israeli state for quite some time. Yet you seem to think that those statements aren't an indicator that Israel has some aggressive stance towards Iran, and Iran is just responding to that.
No, I think
Iran is just responding to that. No, the Iranian regime change happened in 1979. And the Ayatollah, from day one, from the Governance of the Jurists, said that Iran was primarily, the Muslim world was primarily at war with the Jews. I can find that for you if you want, if you don't believe it. And they saw that Israel was an entity of wretched Jews who, with American support and with support from the great Satan, was able to corrupt and fracture the Muslim world and should be eradicated. I'm sorry.
Do you think those statements were made by the new Iranian regime just because of like an inherent anti-Semitism? Or do you think that there's like historical, sort of precedent for the fact that they view Israel as like an illegitimate state, which was established by Europeans?
That's a good question.
Settler colonial project.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm going to read the sentence from Vilayat al-Faqih, and you can tell me if this is anti-Semitic or anti-Zionist. Okay. From the very beginning, the historical movement of Islam has had to contend with the Jews, for it was they who first established anti-Islamic propaganda and engaged in various stratagems, and as you can see, this activity continues down to the present. Later, they were joined by other groups who were in certain respects more satanic than they. These new groups began their imperialist penetration of the Muslim countries about 300 years ago. You've got anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic?
I consider...
He's fucking molding.
Okay.
I'm
Read what these people have to say. I don't know why you don't read what these people have to say.
Hold on. I'll let you respond. Then we're gonna get to Beto. Then we'll get to Tim. We're gonna let them in a little bit and go. So go ahead, respond. Then we'll get.
I'm not even disputing the fact that that statement is anti-Semitic. I just don't think that anti-Semitism defines Iran's foreign policy stance towards Israel. They look at Israel as a hostile threat to the legitimacy of the regime because they are. Israel and the United States, as a power working hand in hand, have always sought to undermine every state in the Middle East and its sovereignty because they want a stronger Israel, because a stronger Israel means a stronger U.S. presence in the Middle East.
Do you think it's a total coincidence? Because you keep talking about clean break, and I guess you don't understand the difference between wanting to destroy a country and wanting regime change in a country that's trying to destroy you. Is there anything it's a coincidence that every country that Israel seems to want to...
When was that written?
That's from the 70s, 79.
So do you think something from 50 years ago is relevant to the world we live in today?
Well, you know what totalitarian regimes work, right?
I'm asking a question. Yes or no? Do you think something written 50 years ago is, oh, hey, look, I have this 50-year-old document. This is exactly what's going on in the Middle East right now.
Well, given that the same rhetoric has continued to this day.
The Quran was written almost 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, especially, this is like the document is the Ayatollah's foundational principles of Islamic government, which is still adhered to this day by the Iranian regime. It's the same regime.
Okay, so this 50-plus-year-old document is still what's driving what's going on today. So what's your solution to this problem? If 50-year-old documents are solving it, let's come up with a solution that says, this is how you fix it today. Because I'm really tired of dealing personally with crap that's kind of left over from the World War II era and sort of the 20, 30 years after that. You know, it's 2025. We should be able to come up with a freaking solution to these problems that doesn't live in the last century.
Personally, I think with Iran, the best thing that you can do is stop them from being a threat to other countries, and stop the proxies and stop the nuclear and ballistics threat. That's all you can do. You cannot do like foreign imposed regime change on Iran. It's too diverse. There's actually too much of a risk that if they had killed the Ayatollah, for example, the problem there is that the IRGC has invested so much recently, unprecedented numbers, in indoctrination because of the fear of unpopularity. So the result of that is that they've ended up taking their youth members, the latest generation, and spending so much investment spending so much investment on nothing I said was
unpopular.
Yeah, nothing I said was
so unpopular. So
nothing I said was incompatible with that.
Why wouldn't? But wait. If they're so unpopular, why wouldn't taking the regime out be hugely popular? Why wouldn't the people in Iran just celebrate that and go along with whatever Western bullshit is imposed on them?
Okay. If you'd let me finish, I would have gone to exactly that point. But if the problem with the threat of getting rid of this current regime now without, a benevolent force in there to go and like readjust the economy and set up a new government and everything else, is that the threat now is that the IRGC has kind of created a monster, and the fact that they have spent so much in indoctrinating their youth generation that the third generation of the IRGC is actually the most radical. They're far more radical than the first and the second. And the threat is that these people, these youths, these are the ones who are okay with gunning down these protesters to keep the regime in. These are the ones who are armed. So the threat is that you have the Ayatollah, and if he is gone, if he just vanishes, you leave a power vacuum. And given that the IRGC and the state has the monopoly on the means of violence, then you risk that youth radical wing of the IRGC picking up those arms, taking those arms that they already have, and abusing that power vacuum to bring an even worse regime. I mean, people have written about this, but again, you're one of those people who like sympathizes with this system, but you don't really know dick about it. So that's why you're getting up in these situations.
I believe in sovereignty, unlike you.
You don't believe in sovereignty because they're a totalitarian regime.
I completely agree.
They're a totalitarian regime that you're against eliminating.
Because can't be sovereign nations until we decide they're not anymore. They're either sovereign nations or they're not. Right? We shouldn't be able to say, oh, look, you were a sovereign nation for a while, but now you've pissed us off. So you don't get to be that way anymore.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude to you, and I don't even really know you. You got to understand these PV-brained fucks. They don't believe in sovereignty. They believe in American empire. They are the neocons, dude. They just, for real though. That's really what Whick and Lonerbox think.
I mean, it's funny that you're saying this. Like,
in the
who's the
Americana to preserve the consumer paradise we all live in? That's
this
is conjecture.
Who's the programmed NPC here? When I literally just said I oppose.
Conjecture This is from years of debating these fucking people and listening to all these
He has
arguments time and
videos
time
of
and
it
time
happening
again.
more
I mean, apparently you're not listening
do,
though,
I
because
actually do.
doesn't matter because
Actually,
all we
I
have
have a ton
to
of
do is
evidence.
dissect their arguments, and their arguments are the only things that they can be.
Dude,
I don't know.
listen to the
accountable
arguments
for.
they're making. Listen to the
I
arguments
am.
they're
Well,
making.
I'm listening to them from the lenses I've never heard them.
Okay,
Not
I mean,
this is
apparently-
real
let me ask
liberalism.
apparently
Let me
you're
ask a
apparently
question
wait no apparently non-smoker, you're not listening though, because I literally just said I don't support foreign imposed regime change and people blasting power vacuums into Iran,
Lonerbox.
because
Fair
as I
enough,
was
fair
about to
enough.
say, I was literally saying
Okay,
that
go on.
if there's going to be regime change in Iran and the way that country works, it has to come from within. It cannot be imposed by Western powers. So listen, talk about listening to what we're saying.
So
You
Lonerbox,
did not
wait,
listen to what I was
Let me
saying.
ask you a question. So you are aware then, you are familiar with the many efforts that people in America or people in Europe have made to fund certain groups to undermine the regime up to this point, correct? Like, for example, the MEK, or even funding Baloch separatists in southeast Iran, or, the disputed funding networks that may or may not go to ISIS Khorasan, which also undermines the IRGC's power, or the Kurds or any of these groups. I'm sure you're familiar with all of that stuff. So given the fact that we've maybe not explicitly the U.S. government every single time, but wealthy, powerful, influential individuals and groups from Europe and the U.S. have funded all of these different groups to undermine the regime, and yet it hasn't had any success, and there doesn't seem to be any decrease in the regime's power. Wouldn't you at least agree with me here that the only way to eliminate the regime would probably be through a war? Because it doesn't appear that it's going anywhere.
I don't know if you believe that. What is the Lenin quote?
I
Decades
do
can happen.
believe that.
Wait,
I don't think the regime is going anywhere unless
yeah,
we
and
put boots on
you
the
know what?
ground and destroy the country.
Yeah, and almost everyone thought the same about Assad until like November last year. So it's again the fragility or otherwise of the current regime in Iran. No one really knows. No one knows exactly what's, especially with the Ayatollah's age, and we probably only will know when it just collapses like overnight.
Syria's a different animal entirely.
Give me a second, because we want people who haven't gotten in on a chance. I want to make sure everyone gets a chance. So we want to give it to Beto. He's been very good. He gets good boy points, head pats. Then we're gonna give it to Soypill. Go ahead, Beto. Ask your question. This is your chance to jump in if you want. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is my attempt to, I guess, clarify each other's positions. I was under the assumption that I was defending the position that interventionism is wrong, and not to defend individual incidents of interventionism or defend against them. So what I'm confused in is, can you give me a trait or quality necessary for you to say we should intervene? What is the shared trait amongst all these things that we've intervened in and the ones that we haven't? What is missing?
Who are you asking?
I'm
asking
asking
Loner, right?
Second.
Loner, do you want to go or do you want me to go first?
You can go. It's okay.
I mean, the problem with all of these is we can post hoc rationalize all the ones that work out, and we can look at all the ones that didn't work, like Iraq and Libya, and say, well, we shouldn't have done those. The problem is, for all of these things, unless you want to be, as I suggested earlier, the country that says we are not going to do it, period, you have to make some sort of calculus as to whether or not it's moral, even though that's not really what the Congress or the president really takes into account. It's more, does it benefit America? Maybe adjacently, is this going to help the people of that country? And when we do help them, are they going to be beneficial and establish some sort of back and forth there? And unfortunately, it's not. We're never going to get it right 100% of the time. And so my position on this is there are probably a lot of interventions that are bad. Most of the regime change ones, I probably, if not all of them, would say we shouldn't have done that. It's really not our place. But there are a lot that are good, and we can look at all the ones that are good and say, yeah, we had some sort of calculus before that, and it's good that we did that. And unfortunately, I think what Tim is suggesting is probably the best thing. And not unfortunately, this is a good thing. We should have more checks for more of these things. We should have more input from other countries, and we shouldn't be able to unilaterally decide because we get it wrong a lot. I would say Whick's question earlier, we really haven't touched on, but like overall, has our intervention been mostly good or mostly bad? I'm probably someone who leans to we mostly have done more bad things than good things. In fact, I would say that of the examples of good things we've done, it's a lot shorter of a list. It really just is. I don't know. Maybe you can look at all these historical books and say, wow, we would have saved more people here and here. We probably have done more fucked up shit than we've done good things. But that doesn't mean we should be anti-intervention, period. It just means that we need better checks and we need to assess these things better, because that's all we can do. We have that power. We can't just not use it, and we can't cede that ground to Russia or China.
I guess what I'm saying, though, is that, it's easy to say that we're doing ad hoc, but to come to the conclusion that we can't find a trait that would allow us to decide whether or not intervention is something that we should do in this moment, then everything is left to conjecture, because there's no way that we can prove to one another objectively that we should do it, that there's a reason to do it. The only reason outside of self-interest is perceived benefit. And what we find again and again is we go to these places for the benefits we perceive to probably gain from them, and we come back empty-handed and worse off for it, like Vietnam or the Gulf War or Iraq, Afghanistan, and now whatever conflict we're involving ourselves in the Middle East once again.
And there are probably a few obvious traits. So obviously, if it's a threat specifically to you, that matters. A threat to your ally would probably matter as well.
I can get behind that.
Credible or threats to trade partners, like, or securing trade, say with like what happens in the South China Sea or in the Red Sea is probably another one. I feel like these are kind of the obvious ones. As far as when people talk about hindsight, I don't even know if I buy that. With what we knew about Iraq, even at the time, people had very good reason to believe that that was not a war that should have been pursued, right? With what we knew at the time, like the protests against the Iraq war, even before it started, were like some of the biggest in European history. Like 3 million people in Rome, like 2 million in, and people were right. So, yeah, I think you have to go with the information that you have at the time and see if it like crosses something to do with threats to either yourself or to partners. I think that's like the main thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, you go for it. I thought.
No, I mean, it's kind of funny because I feel like a lot of my argument was sort of made for me. I don't know the guy in the bottom left with the Soypill, right? Good name. Yeah. So look, I happen to think that the whole logic of we've done more harm than good, therefore, we should still think about intervening is a little confusing. Maybe I'm misrepresenting your argument. I'm sorry if I am.
No, the only difference is if you agree with all of my historical analysis of it, is that doesn't mean we should never intervene. It means we need to be more cautious.
We need
to have more checks in Congress. So if they want to lie us into a war with Iraq, that's
sure. Okay, no, fair. I also don't think that we necessarily have to have a foreign policy where we decide, yes, we will intervene in foreign conflicts, or no, we won't ever again. I don't know if it's like that kind of, bifurcation, right? Like we can, honestly, I'll agree with Lonerbox. It's a case-by-case basis, right? And I happen to think that most of the time when we look at foreign interventions, at least recent ones, it has proven to be a failure because we haven't properly assessed case by case whether or not we should do X, Y, or Z. I think Afghanistan is a great example. Right following 9/11, the American people were furious and angry, and understandably so. And because of that, that drove our foreign policy decision right after 9/11 to go into Afghanistan without there being like a real coherent understanding of, is this the best way to respond to this? Do we really need to invade and overthrow the Taliban and, attempt to lock down a new government in this country and secure it for 20 years and spend $2 trillion all to just leave and then have the Taliban come back, 2 weeks later? I mean, I think we do need to have intelligent, thoughtful discussions about this stuff before we just send soldiers in. But it seems to be that like the part everybody's missing here is that the driver behind military intervention often is different lobbying interests who have an interest in war, right? So like in the Iraq War, there were a bunch of people who stood to profit from that. Weapons manufacturers, people who wanted to do oil speculation, et cetera. And the same is true with the Ukraine war, and the same is true with the Iran-Israel conflict. There's always people who their interests are not the same as the American people. And they're going to really push for war and regime change, whether or not it's a good idea, because they're going to profit off of it.
I think that's kind of an oversimplification, even though I probably agree more than I disagree. I don't think we're in Ukraine, the limiting factor there being whether or not a lobbyist pushed for it. We have other interests, but you're right. People will always benefit from these things. And if you want to talk about like getting these people to have less influence in the government, I'm totally with you there. But I don't think they're going to be the delimiting factor for whether or not we go or do not go to war. Real quick, also, a chatter of mine asked, are you wearing a Leviathan sweater? Is that a band?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, I mean, does everyone kind of agree with Soypill's take here? Then the U.S. intervention has been more negative than it's been positive in the since post-World War II?
I think a better way to look at it might be compared to what other like major powers. I mean, like America's done a lot of fucking really stupid shit in terms of intervention. But compared to what other major power that engages in intervention, like what good intervention has Russia done ever in the world? What good intervention has Iran done? Because they actually pursue proxies like all over the place. They've had proxies in Lebanon, they have proxies in Iraq, they have proxies in Yemen, and they've done fuck all. The entire region despises them in the Arab world because of how much damage they've inflicted. So,
but you
China,
can't really compare us to people that are potentially worse actors. The question is, did we do more good than harm? Also, this is the calculus, and I brought this up earlier, that what if we had not done this and China or Russia were able to go in? I think you might have a solid argument as to whether or not they would have done something even worse. I mean, if you look at the USSR and the way that they proliferated more like dictatorial and totalitarian governments, yeah, sure. But the argument is like we're holding ourselves to our own standard. And most of our intervention, I would say, or at least a majority of it, or
holding ourselves to our own standard,
are bad.
We've also intervened, more than any other country. So it's on like a totally different scale. I mean, like, I'll grant you guys all of the Soviet and Russia stuff. I'm not here to say that Russia does more good than bad or anything like that, especially in recent years. But I will say that we've done a lot more harm than the Russians have done harm, just by the sheer volume of interventions.
What was the USSR but a bunch of...
I'm not sure I agree with that. Like the Russian role in like Syria or even in Libya, because again, like the American contribution and the NATO contribution in Libya was literally because Gaddafi was rolling tanks towards Benghazi and spewing a lot of rhetoric that did kind of sound like he just wanted to exterminate his opposition. And and then they bombed them, and then obviously Libya turned to shit. And we don't know what it would have been like.
That's the problem.
Well, we don't know what it would have been like had Gaddafi gone into Benghazi, right? Given with what he was saying and how the war would have gone then.
Yeah, but
in any case,
but you're acknowledging it doesn't justify the intervention at the end of the day. What turned out in Libya to be look, for all of Gaddafi's failures and problems, and he was obviously a dictator and all that stuff. I mean, Libya was a functioning state under Gaddafi at the very least, and what they have now is a failed state disaster.
Do you think Libya was
Was
Libya a functioning state when NATO started bombing them? When the no-fly zone came in?
I'll grant you that it was degenerating into what could be deemed a failed state. But I would also say that I think the long-term goal of NATO, Israel, the United States was regime change in Libya regardless. So they found a moment where there was like an opportune time to strike, and they took it.
In any case,
the point of that and the failure of that.
But the thing is, like, despite the failure, because I obviously some of it was also just the fact that they completely underestimated the various strengths of the factions, and the UK actually got one of our terror attacks because of that, because we supported that fucking Abadi kid who did the Manchester bombings. A lot of people don't know that. Compare that to Wagner's influence in Libya, which is just to support General Haftar and actually have like people benefiting from those open slave markets. Again, even with like Libya, which is a catastrophic failure of Western intervention, like somehow Russia did it worse and for worse reasons. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's also doing more like Chechnya, Georgia, Moldova, like
sure, but can you really compare all okay. I guess it's hard to measure the degree to which one is worse than the other, but I would just say Iraq and Afghanistan in general, and the many exogenous problems which came about as a result of both of those things. In terms of like scale, I don't see how as bad as Russia's interference in Libya would be.
Russia and Syria, they intervened to help Assad in 2015.
Yeah, just real quick.
No, I'm aware of that. Go on, Whick. Sorry.
Yeah, non-smoker, right? Because I have a question, because your principle here, or at least what you're trying to argue, seems to be that America has done it more and done it worse in general, right? And it is because it has more reach and has done it more often and has done it worse. Can you name a country post-World War II that has intervened in a hot zone, to stop a genocide, what have you, right? To intervene in another country and with their military that has done it better than the U.S., that has done it in a less harmful way than the U.S.?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. Because again, I don't think that anything compares to the scale of what the U.S. has done, and I think only the Soviet Union comes close. And I would say that the Soviet Union did a lot of harm as well. So I'm trying to think like what you're talking about a time period where the world is essentially divided between two major powers, and you want me to try to come up with an example of another country that intervened and did it better. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head.
I just
I think
need
the
one
UK got
example
the
of
Falkland
something.
Islands really good. I think they did a good job with the Falkland Islands.
I think China's doing a great job with Africa right now.
I mean, I can do the commie thing if you won't do it. Like Castro actually helped defeat the South African army in Angola, right? Like the Cubans were one of the first people who got thanked by Mandela after apartheid fell.
Yeah, there you go. Look, I guess my point is like my objective here is not to say American intervention is bad to therefore justify that the Soviet Union was good or that some other communist regime was good. I guess my point as an American to criticize American imperialism is to say that it's done a lot of bad, and I actually don't think it's benefited the American people very much either.
Yeah, and to add to that, non-smoker, as a little bridge build here, it's like, yeah, you can look at other countries potentially doing it worse. I think I was joking about the Falkland, but maybe like the Boers and Rhodesia might have been a good example of intervention, better than some America things. But the point is that we're not holding ourselves to the standards of what other countries would do, unless we're looking at it in a way that, hey, if we didn't do anything, they would do it instead, and therefore we're the best option. It's more of, what have we done? How can we be a better country? Because we have done a lot of bad, and we don't want to keep doing
But that variable, Soypill, is important, and I think Lonerbox has mentioned it several times, and it's worth looking into. Like, for example, if we divested, right, from Israel, for example, right, do you think that Israel wouldn't seek other people to invest in them? And do you not think that us having some form of
No, sure. I agree.
China or better than
It's always going to be in our best
other
interest to be the ones who get to be the power distributors. In the
Yes.
same way, for U.S. aid, being the world's ATM is a good thing. It's good for us to be the negotiators because it's in our best interest. The question is, can we not, as the people who are exerting that power of other countries, improve those countries in ways that pull us away from the mistakes of our past and say, hey, wait, maybe we shouldn't be doing regime change. Maybe we should learn things from Libya. There are always ways for us to be doing this better. And that doesn't mean we have to divest. That's why I'm against being completely anti-intervention. It's how do we constantly improve and iterate on the fact that we are fucking up a lot and we have fucked up in our past. Like
Developing reasons that we can continue to refer to.
Okay, I think we already have those, but they're just not consistent and they're different, and these are very complicated issues. I wish it was so simple, but
yeah, well,
like, don't you think it's a cop out?
It's not a
No, I
cop
think
out.
it's
The
very
cop
clear
out
that
is
it
that you
changes based on. It's very clear that it changes based on who's in the Oval Office. I mean, it's just anybody who looks at history and says, "Oh, it's always the same, no matter which party or president is in there," is just lying, because it is very clearly different based on who's in the Oval Office. Because Trump and Biden, and it's just not the same.
But Bodhi, you can say you're anti-regime change.
Hold on.
Are you anti, Nazi Germany? That was a regime change. We did that. We completely imposed all of our loyalist people into the West German government. Like, this is a thing we did. And obviously that's an easy example. It's like in hindsight, most reasonable people look at that and say, good, we got rid of the Nazis. But that, like, you can't just explicitly have some set of rules. It just doesn't work like that.
Do you think that, I mean, you are aware, like, that's really not why we entered the Second World War, was to institute regime change in Nazi Germany, right?
No, it wasn't
we
the
entered the Second World War. Well, because we were attacked. Yeah. That's the main reason. Right. And I guess my point in saying that is not to say America did something bad or whatever, by interfering in the European theater. And I would say the Soviets are primarily responsible for destroying Nazi Germany, but be that as it may, I would say that this whole idea that America goes out into the world, ventures out, and we spread our political system by changing regimes and therefore making good regimes, more good regimes than bad regimes, and that makes the world a better place. It's just a fantasy.
Well, I'm not saying that, to be clear. It's just, you're not arguing against me for saying that. If anything, the regime change is what I've been arguing against this whole time.
Just hold on. I just have to get this out, and then I'll put on my moderator hat.
Oh, did you triggered Whick because you said Soviets helped World War II?
What I do need, a non-smoker will have to reach out to a moderator to moderate us and things. But yes, Pax Americana has made the world a better place without Pax Americana. And when Pax Americana eventually falls, which it looks like we are waning on the world stage, you are going to wish that we could go back to the liberal world order of the past.
I really doubt that.
I
really doubt
guarantee it. right? We
I really
protect
doubt that.
trade
I think
across
we
the
live in a
globe.
liberal
People
dystopian
are
hell.
freer now than they have ever been because of America. Because
People are
the
miserable.
U.S.
That's
has
why you have Trump.
literally
That's
saved
why you have
South
Trump.
Koreans from
You
a
guys
first-person
understand that. You
fucking
keep
death,
insisting the
right?
world
By
is a
keeping
great
them from
place.
being
That's
North
why you have
Korean
Trump.
slaves, right?
You guys created
we
Trump.
are, look,
All of
What
you.
regime do you want to live in? What regime would you want
Trump,
to
I
live
was
in?
17 when he was put into power.
But that's another debate. I'm going to put my moderator back on. Otherwise, I'm getting triggered because you guys need to defend America better. I don't know why I expected someone who lives in Britain and
PV said I'm not
also
allowed to.
boycott
Sorry,
Trump.
Wick.
But anyway, go ahead. Okay, let's reconnoiter. Let's refocus. We only got a little bit of time left. I don't want to keep you guys here forever. I guess what is give me the worst intervention that the U.S. has done post World War II and the best intervention, in your opinions, and then why. Let's start with Tim, and we'll go around the room. I'm just really curious. Your best intervention and worst intervention. Go ahead.
Okay, best intervention. I'm going to cop out and just say Grenada because it was over in like 2 days and nobody cared. Because it's a simple one, nobody even remembers it. Worst is probably Vietnam, just because we accomplished crap all but getting a lot of people killed, and not much really changed.
Okay, Soypill.
Yeah, I don't want him to hold me to this as the absolutist, but just off the top of my head, obviously, I think one of the best, if not the best, was the Bosnian intervention of stopping one of the worst, ethnic cleansings. And they love us for a reason. It's because we did a pretty damn good job there. Although Serbia hates us, they still are surviving. I don't know if you'd call that a regime change with Milosevic going away, but regardless, I think that was probably the best. The worst off the top of my head also would be then the real 9/11 of 1973. I want to say with Allende and replacing him with Pinochet, this horrible, awful dictator, helicopter pusher outer, and executioner in stadiums. Man, I think that was awful. It's one of the many awful South and Central American regime changes we have done. But Vietnam, death toll wise, was probably.
Okay, Beto.
I'd say the best intervention we've had since World War II would probably be South Korea. If we look at the difference between like how developed the nations are, north and south of the border, South Korea is doing great economically and culturally. And then the worst would most likely be Afghanistan. We were in Afghanistan for no other reason than to be there. When I was in the army, they sent my unit there, and when they came back, they'd done nothing but sit there and get RPGs launched at them. This was in 2016 to 2019, so things might have been different, but
thank you for your service. I will say that.
I appreciate the support. I just
not you, Wick, though.
Not
Not
me.
you.
Okay, fair enough.
I just
Air
failed to
Force
see
doesn't really count. I mean,
Lonerbox, what do you think?
Worst one, since it hasn't been said yet, is probably the Yemeni civil war. Turns out Saudis can't really be trusted with weapons. It's kind of fucking mental, and that blockade was kind of insane. The best one, I was going to say Kosovo initially, but I'm actually going to change my answer and just say that those B2 runs over Iran were very fucking impressive. That was some cool shit.
It's a little early
and also,
to say that, right?
my Mossad handlers are
Nuclear
paying me
program's
handsomely
still
for that.
intact.
It's not still intact. Literally, no one is saying that anymore. But okay.
Tell PV to get the chat
Lots of
down. By the
people
way,
saying
they have
it.
not.
But yeah, the
paid me for
Mossad
saying that
handlers
yet.
are. It's that whole thing where people are like confusing the fact that they can go back to enrichment within a few months versus how far back the program is set. Right? Like if I spend 2 hours making a fucking cake and you destroy it on the second hour, I can get started on it again in 5 minutes. But that doesn't mean I haven't been set 2 hours back. It's silly. Yeah. Read the reports.
Let's go to non-smoker. The best and the worst. Post.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, the worst I would have to say is the Iraq War. Just in terms of number of people killed, especially innocent people, documented war crimes, the creation of ISIS, etc. I would say the Iraq War for sure, and basically zero justification. And the best, I don't know. I feel like you guys might push back on this. I would say the Suez Crisis. Pushing back France, Israel, etc. I would say that would be the best.
And Wick, I know you like defending Pax Americana, but you notice all of us had a different awful thing America has done.
The question is, would the world be better off with or without America. You can list 10,000 awful things that America has done, and I could agree with every single one. But the question becomes, overall, on the balance, if America was isolationist and did none of those things, would the world be better or would the world be worse? And my argument is the world would be worse because you can do 1,000 bad things, but they can be outweighed. There is a balance sheet here, and we can view the good actions and the effects that those have had, and they can outweigh the bad. And I would argue that in most cases, America has done well. But
Whick, can you name 5 good interventions that haven't been named yet?
That haven't been named yet. If I took time to think about it, yes, I probably could. Okay, well, the intervention that we ran on your mom last night was great. Okay, we caught the whole Marine Corps, and we all took turns. Okay, it was great. It was
Wow.
wonderful. Some B-2 bombing runs.
This is a way of saying no.
But
What flavor crayons were you guys eating?
look, the problem is, like, it's when it comes to numbers, you can have 10 bad interventions, but they can be outweighed by one really, really important and really, really good one. I think that the most important one right now, which I fear we are failing at, is Ukraine. We need to do better there. It will be a stain on America if we withhold our aid to them and we do not intervene. And I think this is one of the main reasons that currently I am pro-American hegemony, because we need to be able to intervene, because Russia and China are rising, and we're going to be facing more and more threats such as that. Ukraine is but the first, and we will be having more in the future. And so we need to rearm, repair, re-ready ourselves to, frankly, go to war with what we got. Okay, with that, I've kept you guys here long enough.
I had a question for Whick, but
ask
I'll let it go. On your subject of Ukraine, since you think we should be involved there, is that just throwing money at the problem, or do you think we should put boots on the ground? Because it's
right
clear
now,
they're throwing money at it.
I think we can do what we need to do without boots on the ground, but there will come a time, perhaps, that I think putting boots on the ground might be an option that I would be okay with.
Wait, are we really struggling to think of 5 successful U.S. military interventions?
He says that has not been named yet, and you guys named really good ones. So.
Lebanon 58. There was a very unstable period there, and that was calmed down partially by U.S. intervention. That's where you got the National Pact from. Lebanon in 82 actually was when the Israeli bombing raids on West Beirut, which were going far beyond any PLO presence, and Reagan was actually the one to rein that one in. I don't know if you count the peace process and like Jimmy Carter between Israel and Egypt, even just in Israel alone, like they've done quite a bit. Obviously Ukraine, but you know.
I meant off the top of his head. By the way, I am the pro-intervention side. I still think it's good, but yes, those are good ones.
Look, if I chat GPT'd it, I probably could, right? But I didn't. Okay, with that, let's get to closing statements. So these wonderful, lovely individuals, right, have given their time to come on my show and give you guys content. So please go and give them a follow, give them thanks, and subscribe to their channels. I got the links in my YouTube description, so you click on their links and you can give them a follow and all those things. Tell people, remind people who you are, and give closing thoughts. And we're going to start with non-smoker, and we're going to end with Tim here. Non-smoker, close us out.
Twitch.tv/non_smoker, host of the struggle session every 2 weeks, every other week out of WUSB Stony Brook, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. Happy to talk to you guys. By the way, I'm streaming for the rest of the evening if anyone would like to watch more debating. Hopping on a panel about the same topic in another half hour. Yeah, I oppose regime change in Iran. I oppose U.S. involvement in such. I think that our involvement is inevitable. I think we're going to be pulled into a war. I think it's only a matter of time before boots are on the ground, and it's going to be a disaster, which ultimately will bring about regime change in the United States, which could be a bad or a good thing depending on your perspective, but guess we'll see. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being willing to jump on a little last minute. I appreciate you. Lonerbox.
You can find me at youtube.com Lonerbox or Lonerbox Live /Shalom PV Victory. I mean, not that. Oh, jeez.
Well, thank you for being here, Lonerbox. I really appreciate you. Hope you had at least somewhat fun this time. But let's give it to Beto. What do you think?
I think I learned a lot. I think I need to do a better job at trying to communicate what I'm thinking. I think that it was a learning experience. I think everybody did a good job providing depth and clarity to their positions. But yeah, just thanks for having me on. My only social I have is my Twitch. It's BIT0TV, and other than that, I don't have socials. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. Really appreciate you, sir. Soypill, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm the Soypill. I stream sometimes. I mostly make video essays. YouTube, the Soypill, all 3 words, caps in all of them. Yeah, just to wrap it up, I think if anything, we all kind of came together and said, you know what, sometimes intervening is okay. And that's kind of my whole point, was that we can't have these absolutist positions. And I agree with most people, just a bridge build, we do need better checks. Sometimes we can't use those. Sometimes the action taken needs to be immediate. And sometimes that's a bad action, but sometimes it's a good one too. So it's unfortunately a very complicated world, and we don't have easy answers for all that. But being anti-interventionist, which is my biggest pet peeve of the current left and right, of just saying, well, we shouldn't interfere, it's unfortunately, I don't think, a good policy to have. I think people who are saying that have brain rot, but people like Tim does not have it. I think Tim gave a very nuanced position, so I appreciate that. As with you, Lonerbox, On Smoker, and Beto, everyone gave a very good, at least nuanced take and heard each other out. I do like that. And I want to defend Progressive Victory because they give me money. No, I defend them because I think they do really, really good work in campaigning for people that are going to do good change and getting Democrats elected in Senate and House races. And they also happen to give me money occasionally, and I really appreciate that. But it's mostly for the fact that I really, really like them. They're the only PAC that I've met that actually is doing good action. So go join up, guys. They're actually going out there and canvassing. Thank you.
Well, yeah. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate you, Soypill. Thanks for coming. Last but certainly not least, Tim.
So I will point out that I'm not sponsored by absolutely anybody on any of my social media channels. I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Based.
And you can find me anywhere on just about any of them at Timothy Imholt. And I am an Army veteran, for those of you that you didn't realize that, but it was way pre-Gulf War on Terror. So I got out in 96, so I'm pre 9/11. But you can find me just about any of the socials at Timothy Imholt. And honestly, my position on interventionism is we need to stop doing it so frequently. It needs to be rare, and it needs to be supported by massive international coalitions. And we need to go in, unlike we did in Afghanistan, with a very clearly defined mission. Accomplish that mission and come home. And we suck at defining what the mission is these days, which is why I'm like getting to the point where I'm just like, we need to stop it. So that's me. Find me around.
Check him out, gang. Okay, gang.
Yes,
gang.
stop killing games. I don't know if anybody.
I don't know what that was, but fair enough. We're not ending the stream, but we're gonna send all these people home, and then I'm gonna read super chats, and then I'm gonna rant a bit because honestly, fuck sovereignty of other nations. America is the only sovereign actor on the world stage. Yeah, I don't believe in other countries. So anyway, thanks again. Bye bye, everyone.
Wick.
Thanks for having me, Wick. Bye. Yo, the fuck. Wow. That was a featherweight class debate. Yeah? Could have been worse. Don't be a naysayer. Don't be a grump, okay? Gay. Yes. Do you have history with the bald guy? Actually, no. Not really. I don't. Have I even been in a panel with him before? I mean, I might have been.